gamers? I'm Jason.
I'm Julie.
And today on Dice and Dragons, we are journeying back into the world of time stories. However, we are jumping ahead in time down the timeline because this is Time Stories Revolution, also known as the Blue Box series. It is the sequel to the original Time Stories, except these are going to be individual boxes. You do not need a big box like the White series. Now, once again, it is published by Space Cowboys in conjunction with Asmodee and designed by Manuel Rozoy and Melissa and Kevin Delp. Now, with that being said, Julie's going to tell you more about the game itself.
So it's a cooperative game that plays 1 to 4 players and is intended for ages 12 and above. I didn't see a time on the box. I mean, I think it's at least 2 to 3 hours is my guess.
I would say it's a solid three-hour experience. If something goes sideways, you could definitely talk it up to about 3 to 4 hours probably. Now, what will you be doing in Time Stories Revolution? Well, there are some changes. So you will not be going on runs. You have a new resource called Azrak that will be sort of your ticking time clock. And what you will do is you're going to move around the board, interact with different locations. You will then choose to either have an action, which may be, trying to hack a terminal, steal something. Allies that are not engaged may support you. Otherwise, you'll just be waiting until your other time agents complete their tasks and then move on to the next location as you try to solve the riddle of the Hadal project. In this scenario, you've gone back in time to stop a deadly virus in the year 2099.
You said you went back in time, but obviously we're going forward in time, right?
No, we're going back in time. We're time agents going back in time.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I see what you're saying.
We've jumped forward in the series. However, in the game, you are going back in time to solve the problem. Now, with that being said, what time is it, Julie?
It's time to grab our drinks.
Grab our best friend.
We're going to take it to the table.
I'm really hoping that we like this more than the original Time Stories. We still have a few expansions to play. I'm curious if we'll ever really finish the full White series, but I don't know. Maybe this will inspire us to get it back to the table.
Maybe.
Now we're going to take a quick look at the components for Time Stories Revolution, the Hadal project. Now we're not going to be showcasing all the components. The reason for that is with regard to the tokens, they're double-sided. You're supposed to keep them hidden. We'll take a quick look at some of them. I'm not even going to flip them over, but you'll notice you do get your generic health tokens. The other tokens are marked with M, C, K1, X, W, and Z. Now we also have the rule book, which will showcase everything else that you need for the game, including the list of components. Now over here, we've got some reference cards that I already took out of Story Deck 1. So you do have 2 different story decks, and the reason for that will be explained in the game. I'll show you a little bit as to what is in this deck, but we're going to avoid any spoilers, so we will not look into Story Deck 2. You do get the mission return card here, which also has details on the setting, and this is how you really track your progress, and it represents that ticking down time mechanic that you do have in Time Stories. We've got the game round card here, which represents the different phases, as well as a nice reference card for the different icons. Now, one token I did forgot to mention, there is some gold tokens, 3 and 1. How are those going to come into play? Well, just got to play the game to find out. So in Story Deck 1, you've got the reference cards as well as the prologue, which will set up, make that nice panorama, set the stage. After that, you've got the different locations. The starting one's all tied to this map, but for those of you that are new to Time Stories, as well as those that have played before, you will of course discover more map icons. These little white dots give you an idea of where they're going to go. So as you can see, there will be some underwater locations that show up as you go through the game. Also contained in Story Deck 1 are your receptacles. So you've got Che Rin, Korea, Antonio Mancini, and Jabari Jackson. You can see their stats, their Azrak level, which is the new resource they're going to be using in Time Stories Revolution. It represents the ticking clock, which I much prefer compared to runs. And it does make the game a little bit easier to interact with and complete in like 1 or 2 runs or 1 or 2 updates in this case. Don't worry, we'll explain the mechanics of the game without going into any spoilers when we do the how to play. So this is pretty cool, and it's probably my favorite part of the new system. Everyone does get their own stack of personal cards, which includes their personal gear. So in the case of Che-rented scuba gear, we have a personal objective. Now completing these may or may not be worthwhile, depends on where you're at in the story. We also have these new interaction cards, which you'll be directed to read them depending on what's happening at your location. They're different for every player, but as you can see, you'll get a nice interaction and maybe have to take an item. Now, referencing item, we do have the common item deck, so you can see all the different items that we've got in here, as well as just some promotional marketing stuff that I forgot to take out. It's not that big of a deal. In any case, there are 51 items in the game. Not going to spoil anything. We then lastly have the Destiny deck. Now, these represent modifiers for when you do tests of 0, +1, -1, -1 and a reset, +2, and -2. Don't worry, we'll explain how the Destiny deck works when we get into the how to play. So now we've gone ahead and showed you all the components for Time Stories Revolution, the Hadal project. Now keep it right here as we're going to show you how to play the game, explain the mechanics. Now this is just a warning. There will be some minor spoilers. It's impossible to show you things in terms of how to play, such as the different encounters, without revealing some of the cards. Keep it right here, and I'll be back in a flash. Now we're going to teach you how to play Time Stories Revolution, the Hadal project. Please note this is not necessarily a proper setup for the game. I've done this just to be able to go through the game mechanics. I do not have the correct amount of Azrak available for all of the players in a 2-player game. For a 4-player game, this is the correct setup, so just keep that in mind. You can find information on lower player counts in the rulebook. Now the way a game round will start is you choose a time captain. In this case, it'll be Jabari Jackson. They will decide where they're going to go. In this case, it's going to be the Lookout Lounge. You will place 1 Azrak on the location. You would open it up. You would read card A, which I'm not going to do. Card A will just sort of set the stage, give you an idea as to what's going on in each of these locations, where your different receptacles may want to go. Now, it is completely free for them to select a card. In a 2 or 3 player game, you get some extra actions. One thing I also want to note, if you do happen to leave the Lookout Lounge and you want to come back, well, you need to take that Azrak, you put it on the mission return card. You notice here that it grades your performance. It counts as an update. It's something that you really do not want to do. So in any case, what are your receptacles doing now? Well, they take a card, they would place it in front of them, they would read the card and then give a summary to the other players. So in this case, Antonio is going to take this card. I'd read the card, and you notice here, if I'd like to start a conversation with him, I can read interaction card 9. In this case, what I do is I read interaction card 9, and it'll tell us something specific. In this case, it tells me to take token Z. So pretty cool. Tells me what I need to do. And that's because this is his brother. It's referenced in his backstory. You would then keep that card in front of you until all players have read and revealed their cards. The cards would then be returned to the center. Now, after that, you'll notice, so we're talking about the discovery phase. This is called location recon. After everyone has done their phase, gone through agent telepathy, which is the players talking about what they experience, you then have the ability to take actions. Now, actions can be explore. And explore would mean spending an Azrak, which then goes into the vortex to then interact with another card. So for example, I believe in a 2-player game, we get to interact with 4 cards or 5. So Antonio could spend an extra Azrak to reveal the 5th card, because as we said, coming back is something we do not want to do. So you could just reveal the card, and then you'd follow through what it says. Now, you may also be standing by. If you're standing by, you may actually support another player with a challenge. Now, so in this case, for example, we have a drone that we potentially would like to hack. So this would be an action. In this case, Jabari will need to spend 1 Azrak when you're taking actions such as explore or completing a challenge. You must spend the Azrak, goes into the vortex. What will then happen is we must look at our skill, the purple skill, which is hacking. So we must be plus or equal to the value. Now to do that, we look at our skill. We may spend Azrak to boost the skill. Now, Jabbar will spend 2 Azrak, which also goes into the vortex, to increase his skill to 2. And if Antonio does not have a card in front of him, didn't explore, he can choose to support him and may support him with 1 Azrak. What then happens is we reveal the top card of the Destiny deck. So we got -1. So in this case, it was 4, 5, -1. We succeed, and we would then go ahead, reach into the common items, which I don't have out there, and draw that card. Now we need a discard pile for the Destiny cards. Once this one is revealed, you would then reshuffle the Destiny deck. And that's how you complete challenges. Once you're completed this location, you would then pick a new time captain. Could be the same person, could be someone else based on their pool of Azrak. You then place your Azrak and go again. Now, once your players are low on Azrak, there's the between locations phase. You may do what's called an update. When you do an update, what you do is you place 1 Azrak on the mission return card, and then you divide up the Azrak as you see fit, not going past the starting maximum Azrak. In the case of the Hadal project, that is 8. Also, during the between locations phase, players may then swap items between each other. So if we did have any items, you can just trade them back and forth. And there you have it. That's what you're going to be doing and how you're playing Time Stories, the Hadal project. As you can see, gameplay is fairly straightforward. Now keep it right here as Julie and I will be coming back at you with a review of the game. So Time Stories Revolution, the Hadal project. What did you think of this game?
Well, it did feel like Time Stories, but the mechanics definitely improved it. I wasn't the biggest fan of Time Stories the first time we played it. It was a little bit of a frustrating endeavor. Wouldn't you agree?
I'd have to agree. I mean, the original Time Stories, I did enjoy it. The idea of the runs are interesting, but there are not enough mechanics in the original game to make it very easy to be like, oh, we failed, restart. It was always a hassle to go on another run. Maybe a few things carry over. You could play a scenario for a lot longer, but that wasn't necessarily an enjoyable experience. When we played the original game, I remember us being like, basically mapping it out. It's like, let's go here, 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 and here, get this item to get here, because we just want to be done with it. I didn't get that experience at all with the Hadal project.
No, I mean, and it was interesting. It's got interesting concept for one. What was it called? The blue crystals?
The Azrak.
The Azrak were an interesting addition to it, and the fact that everybody kind of has a specialty as well was a nice touch.
Well, we did have the special abilities in the original game, but I do feel that they came a little bit more into play in this because of the way that they can affect support or different challenges that you face.
Yeah, this one also has a side mission. Each player has a side mission, which I don't believe we had the first time around.
No, that's totally new, as well as the interactions are completely new.
So the side mission does have a small impact on the gameplay itself as well.
Well, we did very well with this. There are some complaints as to how it ended. We'll talk about that shortly. But through the use of the different side missions, we were actually able to fairly well manage our pool of Azrak, and we didn't have really any difficulty progressing through the story. It was a nice, smooth experience, and we only actually had to do one update, which if you look at the mission scorecard is very well. Like, you're almost perfect. So that's one thing that would never have happened in the original Time Stories. There would always have been some type of a curveball that would derail the game and make it, just not pleasant. Now, I will say that I don't know how you found the rules. I found them fairly straightforward. There were a few things that weren't quite clear, and I think they were more foggy because of omission. And I do think the rule books could use a few tweaks clarifying what is and is not an action. Because we spent only a little bit of time in the rule books. I'm sure that if we do play the next game, which is going to be a Midsummer's Night, so based on A Midsummer's Night Dream, I'm guessing. Could be fairly interesting. Should be a smoother experience.
Well, this one, I mean, I'm not spoiling anything by saying that it's underwater. Was interesting as well. It had its different challenges as well. It's definitely, it was like you said, it was interesting and fairly easy to progress with no big frustrations until it's a nice plot twist that we'll not get into because we don't want to spoil anything. But I thought those plot twists were quite interesting and a great part of the story. That being said, again, when it came to the end, didn't love the way that happened and how we kind of had to guess.
Yeah, the end fell flat on its face. The very last thing that you do now. What's interesting about our run, we never once ventured into the control room. So there may have been some more information that we could have gleaned about what was going on. We did jump a little bit ahead, and then we realized that we really should have paid attention to a doctor's notes about everything. But there was still a random element, and that random element really affected your score. And after playing through the game, we did look back through, and I was like, wow, there really wasn't any clear way to just solve it and get the best score possible, which to me is definitely a little bit of frustration. We had that same experience with Legacy of Dragonholt, where it was like, pick options A, B, or C, and then it's like, okay, whatever else happened, this is the way it's going to be, here's your score. And for a game that I don't necessarily want to replay, that kind of pissed me off. I'm not going to lie. I mean, when we jumped ahead, we realized we should have really slowed it down. We got a pretty terrible score, even though we basically crushed the game, except for that one last element at the end. Mm-hmm. How did that make you feel?
Well, it was frustrating, and it just made me think that this probably won't make it back to the table.
Well, this game itself won't make it back to the table. I think that's another thing that we should comment on. So we've definitely praised the improvements to the game. We like the receptacles. The art was fantastic, as it was in the original Time Stories. I love the theme of this one, and to be honest, it was very fascinating exploration and a great story. Now, is there anything that you want to add to what we liked? Is something I missed?
No, I mean, like I said, I like the story, and I like the twists to it, and I like the mechanics better than the first one.
So downfalls, we talked about the way that it ended. And then the other thing I think we should discuss is replayability. Is this replayable?
No. Well, maybe 4 years from now, with my memory, I'll probably have forgotten everything and I'll be able to play it again. But it doesn't seem like something that you can play again without having some sort of recollection of what you've already done and it influencing the game.
No, I definitely agree with Julie. The replayability on this, you might almost say that the original Time Stories, because of and I'm not going to be kind here, the awful run mechanic, the way it was designed, was more replayable than the Blue Box series. Now, you do not need the base box, so you can buy these games at about $35 Canadian, $25 US. So you are getting 3 to 4 hour experience in a box, which isn't bad. The one thing that I'm going to suggest, something the publisher probably wouldn't want to hear, if you're going to dive super into Time Stories Revolution, I'd almost suggest finding another gamer that enjoys Time Stories and alternating your purchases and switching games back and forth, because you can keep track of things and take that over into the Time Stories Revolution experience, where you can get some stuff that'll carry over, which is pretty cool. But you can play the game out of order. Doesn't matter what order you take on these different missions. So find someone else that likes the game, share it, because this is definitely a game that I'd say play it once, pass it on, and maybe you'll play it again in a few years. Mm-hmm. But that being said, it was a fun and enjoyable experience, except for the ending. Anything that you want to add about the replayability?
No, I think you covered it.
So what is your score for Time Stories Revolution, the Hadal project?
So I'm going to be dinging it based on the replayability and the way it ended. And so for me, it was almost a 7, but it's a 6.5.
Okay. The one question that I would then ask you then, would you like to rate the Time Stories Revolution system and then the game experience itself? Because essentially, if we do continue reviewing these games, that's what it's going to be. The system, unless it changes, it's going to have one rating, but everything else will depend on the story.
Well, the story, I really liked the story except for that end part. So, I mean, the way it ended just kind of made me feel like I just wasted 3 hours, because we did really well, like you said, and it just fell like, I can't even think of an expression, but it just basically...
It was just
like
totally random.
It was a lead balloon, basically. It was like, okay, this sucks.
Yeah, no, and I have to agree with you, because everything came down to a lot of randomness. And I dislike that, especially when it was randomness, draw the end game card, here's your score. It was like, really? There's nothing more to it. Like, we expected a little bit more on that. So please, Space Cowboys, for your future games, don't let it end on such a dour note. Anytime you invest a lot of time in something and it just ends like that, it can really sour the experience. Like Legacy of Dragonholt, I thought we would have done multiple plays of that game. I don't know when it's coming back out to the table.
I mean, like I said, it could be lower if it wasn't for the fact that I enjoyed the story and the gameplay and the mechanics up until that.
No, and I have to agree with you. I was debating giving it a 7. Now, one thing I will say, mechanically, much better experience. So straight up, I cannot remember what our original Time Stories score was. If one of our users does, feel free to let us know in the comments below. I would say the system is much improved. It's a lot more streamlined and fun. I'd almost be tempted to give the system an 8 just because of the way everything flows. That being said, there are some clunkiness, there are some issues with the rules. My overall score for this game is going to be a 6.5. I have to agree with you. The ending and a few things that happened along the way just really sort of dragged down that experience.
The thing I would say also is that it depends, even irregardless of what we had rated the previous games, we've seen a lot of games in between, right? Mm-hmm. And that's gonna affect our scoring of the games as well. Every time we score a game from now on, it's always based on everything else that we've played so far. So, I mean, Time Stories, though it is an interesting story, is not, for me, on the same levels as other games that we've played that are 8s, just because of like I mentioned, the replayability and things like that. Exactly.
That's why the system I really like, and I want to promote the system, because when we last reviewed the White Box series, I really I was like, system sucks. So I want to give them credit where credit's due. Much improved. The writing was very good as well. So there's a lot of great stuff here, but the replayability...
There's a couple places where the writing was...
Yeah, there is. It's much improved. Like, it is a better experience, but as you say, previous plays of other games have definitely colored our experience. Great example of this was Cowboy Bebop, the board game boogie. The game is totally fine. It's just we have a lot more games that we would rather play before it. And I think that really summarizes where we're at with Time Stories Revolution. We do have the Time Stories experience. The story's intriguing enough that we're not going to abandon this right away, but I don't know if Midsummer's going to get reviewed right away when it comes out.
So that being said, I think it's time to remind people that they can like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified when there's future content, right?
Yes, and they can also look down below in the video description to find links to all of our social media feeds. You'll find links to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You'd like to see some pictures from the Hadal project. There might be a few minor spoilers in those pictures. Don't worry, can't see any of the text. Take a look at our social media links. Also popping up in front of us will be links to our previously released content. One of them will be to our most recent video. The other will take you back to a review of Time Stories. So now what time is it, Julie?
Now it's time to grab our drinks.
Grab our best friend.
I'm going to keep playing games.
And keep playing games. It's nice to know that we'll be able to at least go back to Time Stories Revolution, see how things go. But it's a little unfortunate that this didn't make us go, Time Stories, jump back in.